Slugger O'Toole podcast is sponsored by Queen's University Belfast. Researchers at Queen's are at the heart of supporting global efforts to understand the coronavirus. To discover more about their research, please visit qub.ac.uk. My name's Brian O'Neill and welcome to the Slugger O'Toole In Conversation podcast. This week my guest is Adam Turkington from Seedhead Arts. Adam is well known as being the manager of Culture Night, the popular annual activity in Belfast, which unfortunately, Adam, I assume is going to be cancelled this year?
Yeah, they've cancelled it.
Yeah, you can imagine during a pandemic, bringing 50,000 people out in the streets probably not the best idea. How many people has it been attracting the past few years, Culture Night? Have you been keeping up to date?
I mean, I'm not. It was around 80,000 whenever I left. So, I'm not aware. I know that definitely last year they were trying to kind of spread it over the evening and then the following day. So I think that did mean there weren't quite as many people out on the evening, which was probably not a bad thing either, actually. But yeah, the last couple of years that I was in charge were insane.
That's a lot of people. Now, I remember you telling me one time, and I didn't actually know if you were winding me up or it was real, that you said you were using like satellite technology to estimate the crowd size. Is that correct, or you will wind me up? Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I will. I think that's what the security guy told me at the time, and I'm beginning to wonder if he was just yanking my chain at the time. But there is it is kind of like a heat map thing. So you'll have like a capacity per street, and you'll see, you're doing a calculation whether he was winding me up. I believed it because I'm gullible that way, or whether they were just like kind of taking a guess at how many people were in the street. But he was certainly telling me that there was satellite technology involved in there finding out when a street had got too full. But there you go.
Yeah, it sounds like those action movies where they kind of CIA are kind of watching real-time footage of... Yeah.
I think that's certainly what the security man thought he was doing, I think he was like taking out Osama instead of, running Culture Night, but there you go.
Belfast. Now, Culture Night, I think Newton Emerson described it as the middle-class 12th, but it did seem very popular. I mean, what do you think it kind of was a key to its success?
It's kind of hard to respond to that middle class 12th thing. It's absolutely in some ways a fair go, and it's a good joke. But it's also, I think, quite dismissive of the 12th and quite dismissive of of the sort of people that came to Culture Night as well. So yes, it was the narratives that people would kind of draw between the two are lots of alcohol, people kind of taking over the streets, and kind of a little bit of all the rules go out the window for our cultural celebration, which is certainly something that I wasn't that I didn't discourage as such. I kind of like the idea of closing the roads and making it an exceptional night where magic happened and you could get away with stuff that you wouldn't get away with in any other night of the year, but I think at the time that irked me because I felt that as somebody who's worked in the arts for all my life, it was probably the least middle class arts event you would ever be at, by definition of it being free and open to everyone and really, really mixed, Look, it's one of the things that defines my drive as a practitioner, is that I want to be able to appeal to as wide an audience as possible. And there is a certain amount of audience curation as well. There's a certain amount of specialism, and I don't want everybody all the time, but I'm a populist effectively. I am interested in things that are quality, but that can be engaged with on a number of levels. So if you want to go on a deep dive and talk about, kind of an ideological, kind of sociological subtext and meaning and all that kind of stuff, you can do that. But also, if you just want to watch the pretty colors, it's also kind of, it works on that level as well. So
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say, because I think to me, why Culture Night worked was that, and I actually think some of the kind of key elements of it that why it worked were actually quite simple in terms of closing off the roads, making it kind of walkable, making, it family friendly, to a certain degree, especially in the early years, with a lot of the street artists and entertainers, etc. And I think people just kind of liked that puttering about, having a chat, meeting up with people, watching the kind of the entertainment. And I was always kind of wondered why they don't just do that kind of like once a month. Now, I don't mean obviously to the same level of Culture Night, because I know there's a bucket load of activities, but in terms of just picking a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon and closing off a lot of the roads and having, stuff outdoors and some kind of entertainment, it seemed to be such kind of like an obvious thing that the council could do. Do you know where I'm kind of coming from? That would be kind of like a very simple.
Well, what I learned very quickly when I took over Culture Night is that closing roads is like not something that we do in Northern Ireland. Now, this has changed and it's easier now. Although Nicola Mallon has found closing Hill Street more difficult than I think she first thought. But anyway, that's another matter. But certainly whenever I took over, when I spoke to the police about closing the roads, they basically said, look, the only legal way to close a road at the minute is to have a parade or to make a film. So I had a parade. So on my first year, we organised a Lord Mayor of the Cathedral Quarters parade, and we had a public vote, and Terry Hooley won. So we had basically applied to the Parades Commission to march up and down Donegal Street for 3.5 hours. So it was like the one route repeated for 3.5 hours, and that is how we closed the road. And that changed everything. And that was I suppose when I took over Culture Night, that was the thing. That was on my first year. That was the one thing that I was determined to do was to close at the very least Donegal Street, because I felt that it was like this in terms of how the space worked as a site. It was this kind of like chasm where buses were running up and down in the middle of the site, which just didn't really work. I mean, there's a number of things at play there. I think the first being placemaking and the idea of, how much we kind of allow cars to dictate our entire space. It's something that it really interests me. And when stuff like the Giro d'Italia comes, or even just during lockdown, whenever there wasn't a lot of cars on the street, everything changes. Like the whole kind of vibe of spaces change, and people become immediately more playful, more free, and more kind of engaged whenever suddenly they're walking down the middle of the road, which is something. Walking down the middle of a closed road is really empowering, as a lot of people who are in the parades will tell you. There's something about taking a piece of space that's used for like HGV lorries and like walking along it and knowing that you're okay to do that. And sort of, it's something like, I think it feels like reclaiming space or something. So there's the idea of closing roads is absolutely key, I think, and reclaiming back from the car a lot of our civic spaces. That's kind of, and I always kind of explain to people that Culture Night was once a year an opportunity to demonstrate what was possible, and that's not my job. Is not to do it once a month or twice a year. My job was to do it once a year and really push hard to demonstrate what was possible, and then it was the job of other legislators to kind of look at that and do something with it. In terms of the family friendly stuff and the kind of, like, it was always my intention that, again, in terms of the populism aspect of it, I kind of feel that people don't really get what art is, and creativity. And I think that's largely down to the arts establishment in our country. who like to keep it to themselves, and like to put it behind, large price points in inside venues that are, kind of only for people in fur coats and bow ties, and whenever people feel like, they're asked about whether they care about the arts, they kind of think, well, no, I don't give a shit about opera or, classical music or theatre, so therefore I don't care about the arts. And that's really, you don't get that anywhere else in the world nearly. And that's largely down to how the arts has been portrayed by the people in charge of the arts. So a lot of what I was trying to do was kind of just shake that up a bit and say, this is creativity let loose, and this is the potential of what it has to do if you kind of let it run.
Is there a difference in your mind between the arts and entertainment?
Yeah, there's a difference. But it's not. It's like it's a lot. Why? I mean, yeah, not all arts is entertaining, I think. And I guess, is all entertainment arts? Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like there's a very, if you were to draw a Venn diagram of the two things, there's a lot of it that's the same, and there's certainly more of it than the Arts Council would suggest. I mean, the Arts Council don't have stand-up comedy as an art form, amongst a whole load of other things that are really very creative and are art forms as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I suppose what I'm getting at is there's always this kind of eternal question of, what is art? And especially now in the modern age where everyone can be quite creative. I mean, I don't know if you ever watch some of the kind of TikTok videos or stuff on YouTube.
Yeah. No, but I know what you mean. I watched them on my daughter's shoulder. But yeah.
But a lot of stuff you see on TikTok, I mean, honestly, it's better than some stuff you see in the BBC or the shows. It's quite imaginative, a lot of these things. But I mean, as you say, I mean, the arts establishment can be quite sniffy about certain things. But I think it's fair to ask this question of, with the internet, it's had this kind of democratization of creating and tools, and that anyone can be churning out mini movies or creating songs on their MacBooks or iPads or whatever. And so it kind of blurs the lines really of what is traditional art versus the new arts.
Well, yes, but a TikToker isn't going to get funded by the Arts Council, right? So we can have a conversation about what's creativity and what's art and what's entertainment and all these kind of things. And unfortunately, we're living in a kind of society where there are people in positions of privilege who like to draw lines around their concept of what art is, because that's their arts. So, I mean, whatever I think, I think what I think, yeah. But unfortunately, that hegemony is kind of set in place by an establishment that is calling arts a very, very narrow set of skills, which are great. I mean, I'm into them, but it's much wider than that.
Well, I suppose where the question was leading was there's a whole debate now around universal basic income, of just kind of giving people free money. And I often kind of wonder, particularly in arts, because a lot of the money is eaten up by the bureaucracy and the administration or whatever. But if you did have universal basic income, which would just allow people to a certain level of income to get on with what they actually want to do without having to be defined in a particular kind of box. Do you see where I'm coming from, No,
100%. I mean, when I first read up on UBI, I was like, this is what the arts, this would be revolutionary for the arts. Yeah. Because it would allow people to kind of exist on a basic level and not have to kind of work in a bar to pay the bills while they kind of practice their art form on on the side, you know. I mean, just to give you, I mean, my business is entirely free of funding. You know, I'm not a charity. Seedhead Arts is a business. And the other, I mean, I run another business called Daisy Chain, and it's a business, you know. So we aren't going. I'm not applying to the Arts Council, and in fact, we set up Vault Artist Studios, of which I'm also the chair, and that is a artist studios with over 100 artists in it. And we've set that up with no public funding at all, and certainly no core funding since we have set up. Got a little bit of program money to do programs, but we are effectively self-sufficient. And that's a thing I'm really proud of, you know, because I don't like having to dance and fit that kind of that agenda, you know. So yeah, absolutely. I'm really lucky. That's kind of the thing, you know. I kind of work across a number of art forms, and some of them are quite commercial, and I can make enough money off them, and that allows me my passion projects, you know, to work on other stuff that doesn't make so much money. But there's literally thousands of people who work in the sector who are, especially at the minute, like just don't even know how they're going to pay their next like food bill, never mind their rent, you know.
Yeah, because I remember, I mean, I've been reading some music biographies lately, and a lot of artists will say, and particularly the ones from the kind of 70s and 80s, that the dole was, in a way, the universal basic income of its day. You know, it allowed them the opportunity to kind of to create and to kind of sit around and to kind of discover themselves and try music and form bands and all that there. Whereas now the kind of focus almost seems to be entirely in this kind of the cult of productivity, and that every minute of your day must be spent in splendid efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's this real there's an art of not working, personally, I think, you know, and that's what's been really great for me about lockdown, was like kind of really being able to lean into that even more than possible. Again, as a freelancer, I think when you work in a job, and you know, like I worked for council for 10 years, you know, and you go in and you have to be at your desk at a certain time, because, you know, if you're not at your desk, you're not working. And if you are at your desk, you are working. So you go and you sit at your desk, you clock out, and that it doesn't even really matter what you've done during the day. Like, you know, they'll ask you, have you done something after a while, but there's no real kind of marker on that, you know. And like I find, actually, as a freelancer, I do very, very, very little work in the mornings. That's just my thing. I can't really get my head around it. But yet I can absolutely nail potentially a full day's worth of work, basically, in a couple of hours in the afternoon. And if I'm really behind, you know, burn into the night, you know. But that idea that I have to work a certain amount of hours to get a certain amount, you know, it doesn't, that's not how it should work. You know, we need to, there's this idea of time and productivity and having to kind of just be at it all the time, which I think is really unhealthy. And it's particularly unhealthy for creatives, you know, because to be creative, you need space, you need time to kind of like let ideas percolate, and you need to sit and have coffee with people. Like, you know, when I used to work in the waterfront, and I was drinking coffee with people all the time, and the people used to rake me, and I'm like, this is my work, man. This is me. We're coming up with really good ideas, sitting talking shit. You know, that's how it works. Like, all the stuff that I do has pretty much come from me either drinking pints or drinking coffee and like talking about shit, and then going, hey, let's do that. You know, so it's
my question as a fellow kind of old person compared to young people, we remember a world before the internet, just about, because what my problem with lockdown was, at the start I kind of like got a lot of books, and I was going to kind of learn these skills and do X, Y, and Z, and what actually the reality was, I just found myself arching around the internet, which, on Twitter and stuff I got there. And the internet, social media is just so addictive and enticing. Then it leads to this problem of you don't have the kind of space to think. Remember, like, when we were kids, used to be bored, or like nothing on TV, and I sometimes wonder for young people nowadays, or for any of us, that those moments of boredom just don't exist anymore, and therefore you don't process things or the time to think. You don't kind of want to get in that. So I've just kind of been left with this kind of feeling of like self-loathing, of kind of wasting the lockdown.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things there. I suppose I would say that my 16-year-old daughter absolutely is bored. Like, she's bored of the internet. She's sitting looking at just the same old shit all day, and is like, and is bored. Like, she's like, I'm so bored. You know what I mean? So I think that there's a different sort of sensibility in that generation, and I'm very lucky. I had sort of, I mean, I did a lot of running, and I did a lot of baking and a lot of cooking, and those are things that I love to do. So I'd kind of just upped them. Probably spent a bit more time on the internet. I'm actually really surprised at how little I've watched TV, and I've played a lot of. There's a card game called Dominion, which has an amazing online interface, which you can play against people. So I've been hanging out with my mates on Zoom and playing Dominion a lot, and that's been great. And I've learned how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Talk about nerdy. So somebody thought that would be good fun. That would be a thing that would be an excuse to hang out in lockdown. So we've done that, which is, I can't quite believe I'm admitting this in public, but
lots of 20-sided dice and all that type of stuff.
Lots of 20-sided dice, yeah. But it's kind of like just hanging out while rolling 20-sided dice. To be honest, it's a bit of crack.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the things that I find is that there are things that you do that are space. So they're not like, I'm not meditating, like I'm not doing yoga, or I'm not like kind of just sitting there at one with the universe. But like, I would say, like, sometimes when I'm busy, I always say, like, the only place I have to think is the shower. The time that I have my best ideas seems to be when I'm in the shower, because it's the only time where I'm like not doing something. My mind has a little bit of time to wander. And now I think during lockdown there was a lot more of those activities. So like kneading bread, or kind of going for a run, or even just like playing a mindless kind of game is like a game on your phone, which is like, we beat ourselves up over playing a game on your phone. Like, why have I wasted that time? And actually what you've done, I think sometimes, is you've just let your brain do nothing for like 20 minutes. So yeah, no, sorry. I mean, I just kind of feel like sometimes we beat ourselves up over this kind of notion of like worthiness, like we have to be doing. And there's a lot of talk about it actually in the talk of lockdown. If you just get through this, then you're doing okay. You don't need to learn to craft or some shit like that. Exactly. It's kind of like, it's an opportunity to sit in your hole and do fuck all. And when do you get the chance to do that? You don't really. So happy days. I've drank far too much, but anyway.
I suppose what I was thinking of is, because when you're in contact with young artists, are they still as kind of creative? Because I kind of wonder, is it just more of an issue of our generation? You're kind of between these two worlds of online, whereas younger people that've kind of grown up with all this stuff, maybe they're probably able to better handle it. More
so, to be honest. Like, they've got a lot more going on. There's a lot more. There's a lot more stimulation. There's a lot more information. There's a lot more opportunity to learn and find out things, and you can teach yourself. You can learn things on the internet that you used to have to go to class for. So people are integrating lots of different kind of crafts and art forms into their practice without having to kind of pay for a course or And I guess, and you'll find that as well at the Vault, is that there's a lot of people kind of sharing practices and kind of collaborating together and just kind of, I mean, community is stimulation, you know what I mean? Like being with other people and talking, I mean, and that's kind of the biggest problem, I think, creatively with lockdown. I can't imagine being somebody who's like been locked down and, you know, on their own. Like that would just be, you know, that whole lack of human contact.
Well, does the lockdown kind of show us then the importance of community and connection? Because remember at the start of lockdown, everyone was doing online pub quizzes and Zoom calls, and I mean, I work. I mean, I've been working in the internet 25 years, so I know all this stuff. But I would be the first person to say that most of it's just crap. You know, it's no substitute for the real thing or online concerts or any of this here type of stuff. You know, it's fine. It's better than nothing, but you'd still rather have reality. You know.
Yeah, well, I haven't gone to any online. I've watched a couple of, you know, comedy things that friends were, you know, the people that I work with had done. But it's not for me. Online entertainment. I'm like, you're pretty much up against global, you know, budgets of millions and millions of pounds. You know what I mean? I'm not like somebody. Yeah, it's kind of hard to kind of go up against that. So,
but then again, some people do. I mean, this guy, the comedian Paddy Raff, if you're familiar with some of his stuff. I mean, he seems to have had a great lockdown. He's kind of been churning out videos, and he's got himself a BBC show out of it, and all the rest. So maybe.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you want to do it, like I'm not. I mean, it's like anything, you know. It's not for me, you know. And I've seen some of Paddy's stuff. It's great, but like he's doing, like I think, you know, it's a different thing saying I'm going to do some sketches and I'm going to put them on Facebook, you know, than it is saying I'm going to charge you, you know, a tenner to come and watch an hour of my content. You know, that's not something that I've explored. And I think largely it was down to the fact I didn't need to, because I was kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to sit this out. And I think a lot of what we do is so much about bringing people together. We did the real. We've done one event, one of our regular events once a month. It's tomorrow actually. It's called Real Sketchy, and we've worked out a way that we can do that, and it feels like we're kind of together, you know. But it's, I mean, the thing about Real Sketchy is I do it for free, so you know, I do it for the crack, and I don't have to charge. It's never, you know, so. We're just kind of live streaming it and not charging. So, yeah, it's not a thing that I've given a lot of thought to be honest, because it's not for me. But that doesn't mean to say that it's not going to work for other people. But
okay,
I hear Ryan Vale's show. Well, I heard lots of really lovely reports about his show that he did last week actually. So I was kind of bummed I didn't actually have a go at that. But there you go.
Check that one out. So I was going to move on to ask you about this year. I think for the first time since the Second World War, we have either no 12th or a minimised 12th. Now, a few years ago, I was at the 12th celebrations with a friend of mine. He was with a group of American students and showing them around. And we went to the field. Now, a lot of people get a bit sniffy about the 12th and about the alcohol and all the rest of it. But what I found about it was, to me, it was a lot of kind of working class kids from different estates in Belfast, and it was a day out for them. And I said, look, you know, let them have their day out, go for it, like, you know, because so much stuff is kind of so aimed, you know, to middle class people or whatever, that, you know, it's nice to have kind of, once you strip out, you know, obviously the political baggage, it's primarily a day out. And they weren't really worried about battles or supremacy or whatever. They were just having a bit of crack with their mates. So why I'm bringing that up is because I know you used to be the head of the Shankill Festival.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, yeah.
Back in the day. But how can we... I'm trying to phrase it right. Because I'm not saying that you kind of like neuter the 12th or the bonfires, or try to make it more kind of middle classly acceptable. But is there a way that you can kind of like redevelop the 12th and the celebrations to kind of make it more attractable for their audience? I mean, maybe like more concerts and events in the areas. I don't know. Do you know what I'm kind of getting at?
Yeah, I do. I mean,
to make it less.
I think there's yeah, like you're kind of struggling to ask the question, so that goes to show you how difficult it is to answer. So, I mean, I kind of feel like there is a. I've been thinking a lot about identity politics, in the last couple of years, I think, and just how capitalism depends on it. You know what I mean? And I kind of, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of basically not letting people kind of have their day out. Yeah. And I'm uncomfortable with a lot. I guess the example is like, I'm uncomfortable with people using the phrase flag with an E, and I'm uncomfortable with that kind of level of snobbery, I think sometimes. And I think we need to, and something came up in my memories recently where I kind of said like, bonfires are class, if they're done right, what I mean? Bonfires are like, in my second year of culture night, I made a point of having we had a Burning Man in front of St. Anne's Cathedral, and it was class. Bonfires are amazing. And I think the question is not about how do we neuter this, or how do we kind of change it, and it's certainly not how do we like add other entertainment that will attract other people, because for me it's kind of like it is what it is. And when I ran the Shanghai Festival, obviously that's what I was doing, but we weren't doing it at the 12th. You know what I mean? We weren't trying to rebrand the 12th. We were just trying to kind of have a look at Protestant culture and kind of put other things alongside it, so that it was kind of so there was celebrations of that, but also for me it was a lot about trying to let the people who I was kind of responsible to, expose them to other kind of cultures. And I don't mean that in a kind of patronizing way. I just mean like sort of like making it so that it is more complex than that, and a bit more nuanced, and a bit more kind of, for me, kind of culture is at its best when it's kind of taking lots and lots of different influences from lots and lots of different places, and kind of like weaving that into something, and allowing them all to be their bits, and have their own bits, but then also kind of not being afraid to set them beside each other and let them bounce off each other. That makes some kind of vague sense.
Yeah, because where I was kind of trying to get to was, in some ways, it would be good to see kind of more kind of cultural activities in kind of working class areas. But obviously, it probably has to come from the community, because the last thing I want is a bunch of middle class people coming in and telling them what they should enjoy. That should be more bottom up, which I suppose is kind of what you're doing with some of your activities.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly in the vault. We're experiencing a lot of really interesting dialogue with the people who are right on our doorstep, and I think they're beginning to appreciate. I mean, they've not really had that kind of type of creativity in their, you know what I mean, in their world, or in their street, certainly before. And there tends to be this kind of quite patronizing, here's some art we're going to inject into your, so it's kind of either here's this person coming and doing like glitter and paper and stuff with the kids, it's art, or like here's something that you can't afford to pay for, we're just going to, we'll put it in your area and make it cheaper. I don't know. I kind of I obviously I worked in that. That was like 20 years ago, so it's a while. But I mean, it really did kind of inform my practice in terms of understanding, how difficult it is to kind of change that perception that people have that art is not for them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that it's and I think that it does have to be incremental, and it does have to be. You're not gonna, you're not gonna change. You're not gonna change somebody's life by like parachuting the Ulster Orchestra into their community for a night and then they leave. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
not kind of how it works. Um, I think it's about people being in the community and kind of engaging with them and being part of that. And that's not something that's ever going to be funded. Like nobody's going to go, you can't fund that. Like that's a life choice to kind of be in a community and kind of engage with them and be part of it and like sort of reach out to them and kind of choose to be part of that community. That's not a thing that you can make with funding decisions. You know, understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
you could throw like millions and millions of pounds at an arts centre in the middle of a loyalist area. And the problem is that everybody would be into that and like trying to get a bit of it and then just doing here, let's get a bouncy castle for the kids. You know what I mean? And that's not what that's not what it is. So you can't. It's all like for me, everything comes to community. Everything comes down to community, and
Mm-hmm.
everything comes down to building relationships and finding ways to build connections, and those connections should make people question their their ongoing narrative. If you I like personally, I think one of the things I've learned as I've got older, as you've pointed out earlier very kindly, we're old, is that you should never stop learning that you're wrong. You should never stop questioning. And I'm sure, knowing what I know about Slugger, there'll be a million comments and the telling me how wrong I am about lots of things, and that's fine. Because I'm still learning. I still don't really know. Certainly in the whole stuff around identity politics, I'm really wrestling with it and privilege and the whole kind of concept of how to interrogate that. And as a white, you know, middle-aged man who feels like there's kind of a lot of issues out there that I'm concerned with. How do I kind of be an ally to the right people, but also still feel like the biggest problem, that we need to address is capitalism, and that, so there's lots of stuff going on, but all those things are for me around, trying to have conversations, and you only
Yeah.
have conversations if you surround yourself with people who are like-minded. Then it's a really boring conversation and you don't go anywhere. So
Yeah, because one thing I think artists can kind of teach to kind of rest of society is like every now and again people will ask me about Slugger and they'll ask me what Slugger business model is, and I explain that we don't charge anything, we make no money, and nobody gets paid, and they kind of look at me as if I'm mad. But it is a bit. I mean, you don't say parrot, you don't want to be too pretentious, but it's kind of like you do it just for the hell of it, and that's what I like about some kind of artists. They're just doing something because they want to do it, and I think sometimes in the modern world, everyone is looking for the funding, everyone's looking for the sponsorship, which I know is important, but sometimes it's nice just to do something just for the sheer bloody hell of it.
sure, I mean, Vault exists because some good dude sent me an email going, "Do you want this building?" And I was like, "Aye, okay." And I got some mates together and we took over a bank for a couple of years, and then whenever we didn't have that anymore, I found this old school, and asked, and there's no, I don't get any income from it, but what I've managed, what I and the people who have, brought on board, like I've managed to create is this phenomenal little community of weird, messed up people, like just the most diverse wingnuts. It's great. And people who challenge me every day, and ask me, questions that I wouldn't normally get asked. So this it's a really, those things and that's why I do that, because I'm really interested in, and again, my practice is, if you want to call it that, I'm obsessed with this idea about how do we build connections. And I guess that's because I grew up in Northern Ireland, in a place that was really kind of needing that. How do we find a way to have conversations with people from different backgrounds and different ideologies, and find A, some common ground, but then B, like the kind of the peace internally to be comfortable with the fact that not everyone's like me, and that's okay.
Yeah. So just to probably last round it up, I was going to ask you about alcohol, because I know on Twitter you have kind of some views on pubs and licensing and all this here type stuff. Because I've been thinking a lot about drink of late. Because I mean, I do drink, but I've cut back substantially since my sons came along, because the hangovers and toddlers just didn't mix. So I've been cutting back. And then I know this week they had an audit office had a new report out saying that alcohol problems cost the Northern Ireland economy like 900 million every year. You've got this big issue, and a lot of arts kind of events and a lot of entertainment events kind of like this are synonymous, with alcohol, go hand in hand. And so I just kind of wonder what you think about that, and then maybe also your views, on pub scene in Belfast, of should it be more liberal with licenses and make it easier to create new venues, smaller venues, that type of thing?
There's a lot there. I mean, I drink too much, like, totally. I have no bones about saying that. Like, and a lot of that has to do with working in the area that I work in. But also, I mean, it's funny, a lot of it has to do with having a busy life and 3 kids. So, like, when I need to blow off, I blow off, It's obviously not. Sometimes I think wouldn't it be great if somewhere in an alternative universe, like, alcohol was illegal and, we all kind of learned to get by without it. But that's not the case. And, what I would tell, I teach event management course once a year. What I would always teach my students is, look, it doesn't matter if you don't drink, and it doesn't matter if half your audience don't drink. You can't afford to lose the half that do. And there are a ton of people who go to events and arts events all the time and don't drink, and that's fine. But there's also a ton of people who for whom it's synonymous with going out.
Yeah.
And you're not going to, like, it's not my job to change that, right? And I can't afford, as a commercial operator, to just kind of, just go, well, that's tough, we'll just lose half that audience. So it's always something you have to bear in mind. But there's I guess in terms of what your second part of your question is, there's a drinking culture in Northern Ireland. And I would kind of argue that part of that drinking culture is driven by the nature of our business here. And a lot of that business is driven by, like, in order to run a bar in Belfast, 99% of them, you need to, it happens because of an archaic piece of legislation. I'm not interested in the licensing laws. I don't want to drink till 5 a.m. I mean, that would be good, but that's not the most important problem with licensing laws in Northern Ireland. The most important problem is that licenses are limited. So what that means is that if I decide I want to set up a business as a bar, I can't just apply for a license. I have to get one that already exists. So these only become available every so often, and when they do, they are tens of thousands of pounds to have a license. And the only way that most people can afford these is they get the breweries, the big breweries, usually one of 2 breweries, tenants or Guinness, to pay for those. So that means their taps are tied, which is disadvantageous to our local brewery scene for a start, but then also means that maybe you could argue there's a little bit of price fixing. We certainly have London prices in Belfast for our alcohol, but it also means that all those bars are basically driving what is essentially a highly capitalist model. So you're basically prioritizing profit over most other considerations. Now, there'll be a lot of talk about responsibility, because if they don't talk about that, then they lose their license. But effectively, what you're trying to do is sell as much drink as you can. And I think what's interesting when you kind of compare most of the bars in Belfast, for example, to the likes of Pedro and the Sunflower, and one of the reasons why he's the kind of hero of the latte drinking Liberate is because he doesn't treat. He's a person. His taps aren't tied, and he doesn't treat his business like that. So he's very much holistic about his customers and his politics and his business. And that's a really, really refreshing kind of way to be. And that's why I'll go and drink there, and I'll go and drink in the Black Box. They'll be my two places of choice, So there's a really basic problem with how. So when you talk about drinking culture, is what I'm saying. So you can't really have a small kind of family-run bar, unless you've been there for 20 or 30 years. You can't set one up now. You can't have a kind of. You need to maximize the size. When you get a license, you need to get a big room. You need to get as many people in there as possible. You need to sell them as much drink as possible. And you can see that reflected in our drinking culture. That's the drive to get people to do that.
It's quantity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, and again, that's why the entertainers that you get in these bars are lowest common denominator, cover band singing Ed Sheeran. I personally believe that they turn the volume up too high so that it's impossible to have a conversation. So you drink more, right?
Yeah, you drink
when
more.
You can't hear the person beside you talking, there's nothing else to do but drink. And I've been in so many bars where it's like, I can't talk to you, so we'll just finish this pint and go to the next bar, basically, is what I do. But there's obviously plenty of people who hang around.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, that one issue has a multiplicity of impacts that are unseen and largely untalked about, because Hospitality Ulster, who are the ones who are lobbying for this, they aren't concerned with that. They are in bed with that. They are embedded to that system, and their dues are paid by people who are wedded to that system. So I'm kind of interested in looking to see if we can actually get a lobby that would speak for the drinkers as opposed to the bars, because whenever you talk about licensing or you talk about drinking culture in Northern Ireland, it's always that lobby organisation that's on, and they don't represent like most of the people they don't represent the drinkers. They represent a very small number of publicans, who own maybe 10 or 20 bars each, and I don't really think they speak for me as a punter. And I respect their right to do their business. I understand they're working within a system, blah, 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 blah. But as a drinker, I think the system's a bit shit.
Hard to, this maybe a bit of a technical question, but if for licenses, can you only buy an existing license that's in Belfast, or could I import one from some wee bar in Armagh is closing down? Or
not a total expert. I'm pretty sure you can. I think it is. I think you can buy one in Armagh, but I don't know. I couldn't be 100% certain.
Yeah, because you can see after COVID, like a lot of those kind of small, especially rural pubs, are going to go to the wall. You're not going to be able to survive.
Yeah, there's going to be licenses. There's going to be some licenses. The irony of it is that the cost of a license is probably going to come down, because a lot of businesses are going to go to the wall, and even the big boys won't be able to grab them all. Maybe they will. I don't know. But yeah.
So I suppose if you were, that should be your next campaign, is to get a group together just to buy a cheap license. If they hit rock bottom, just to have for a new venue.
Well, yeah, look, it might happen. Not me, but like there are people who are. Pedro's obviously done it, and a few other I'm not trying to suggest that he's the only decent publican in Belfast. There are lots of good guys out there, and like, to be honest, the intention of even the big guys is kind of not terrible. You know, they're not Witherspoons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at least, for me, like, again, like we talk about, like, for me, it's I just don't hate the player, hate the game. You know, I just don't think the system is correct, and I think it leads people to make decisions both as publicans and as drinkers that are not that we could probably do without. You know, I think there's a better way of doing it.
Because I know one of my rules is I never drink at home, because my wife doesn't drink and I never drink on my own. And for me, I think the transition is unfortunate, because a lot more people now are drinking at home even before the kind of lockdown. And I think it's kind of very bad for your mental health, because I think pubs have an advantage and you can go out and have a chat with your mates, bit of crack. Whereas just sitting at home in front of the TV, boozing yourself, is just kind of possibly the most depressing thing I can think of.
I don't know. I've been practicing that quite a lot, and I'd say, I mean, playing cards on Zoom is like, and having a drink is totally fine. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. But at least you're not just sitting watching Netflix and
the danger is you don't have a publican going, mate, you've had enough. You need to go home. Like, you know what I mean? So like, passing out on a Zoom quiz is not a good look. Do you know what I mean? Like, so.
So we'll probably finish it up there, Adam. So to finish off, I was just going to ask you, is there any kind of like books or podcasts or whatever you've been kind of listening to lately or reading lately that you kind of recommend the listeners to check out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a massive reader. I've been reading the Umbrella Academy comic books recently, which I've been enjoying.
What was your view of the Netflix show remake?
I liked it, actually. You know, it's like, it's different from the book in ways that I'm kind of okay with, because it's kind of unfilmable, really, a lot of what what's in the original. So I've I mean, I wasn't I actually hadn't read the book. I'm reading the book after, like, Heresy. I'm reading the book after I'd watched the TV show, so I'm kind of interested to see the differences. But I kind of think as separate pieces of work, I quite like them. Looking forward.
I kind of enjoyed. Was it the October Faction? Was that what it was called? I think it was based on a comic book as well.
I haven't watched it. I did enjoy Lock and Key in a really childish way as well, though it was kind of fun. I've also been listening to Peter Rollins' podcast, which, like, he's a friend of mine and he's had this podcast for a long time, and I've never really. I've always thought it would be a bit boring, but it's really great. I'm really enjoying it. It's called The Fundamentalists, and it's him as a philosopher talking to this American comedian that he's friends with, and the American comedian kind of plays the me in it, asking stupid questions and going, oh yeah, that's kind of funny, and then he kind of explains the philosophy stuff, and it's actually, in lockdown, it's been really interesting. You know, there's just lots of talk about. There's a really good one on communication and just how, you know, thinking about those big existential issues is part of that space that we talked about earlier, in terms of, like, you know, I think when you think about big ideas, it informs your creativity. You know, it absolutely makes you think about, you know, how you do things and why you do things and how you could do them better, even though you might not fully get it at the time, you know.
Yeah,
the practice. I did philosophy at university, so for me, like, the practice of thinking is really important. It's really important that, like, how you form your ideas and how you think about why you think, and being free to change your mind again. You know, that sort of stuff. It's all really good.
Well, I was going to say, that's probably something that we're all looking forward to again. Is sitting in the Sunflower Bar at 1 a.m. discussing philosophy over a few pints.
Too right, man.
I'm putting the world to right. So I think we'll leave it up there. Now, if people want to find out more, I know you're on Twitter. We'll put the link, and we'll put the link to Seedhead Arts. And I think you also have some walking tours coming up, don't you?
Yeah, we're starting the walking tours on the 19th of July, and we'll have events kind of coming online, a few small events in August, and hopefully in the autumn back to our regular things. We'll probably have a small street art festival this year. We've postponed it from May. So, it's we'll see. We're watching the numbers every day, and numbers here are good. Like I think we should be. I'm pretty comfortable with what we've got at the minute. Like so,
Good
yeah.
stuff. Well, on that positive note, we'll leave it there. So, Adam Turkington, thanks very much for being our guest. If you've enjoyed today's Slugger podcast, please subscribe and give us a review. Thank you.
Thanks.
The Slugger O'Toole podcast is sponsored by Queen's University Belfast. Researchers at Queen's are at the heart of supporting global efforts to understand the coronavirus. To discover more about their research, please visit qub.ac.uk.